Hello, everybody. I'm Nazar Bina, your host of the Omnichannel X podcast. I'm going to be interviewing today Dan Brown, not the Dan Brown from the Da Vinci Code, although he has admitted that he's definitely racked up a few followers with that misunderstanding. He is an information architect. If you know anything about the world of digital or user experience, you probably come across information architecture, and you may have come across his work. He publishes and shares and contributes a lot to the community and has been doing so for many, many years, I think decades. He's been a contributor to shape how we think about structuring information, designing systems for usable, scalable, and dare I say human applications. Information architecture is not always the most glamorous topic. Some people are very passionate about it. I am. It's not new, it's not shiny, but it's becoming newly relevant as we look at omnichannel, and it's foundational for making omnichannel solutions work. It's also often misunderstood, boiled down to website navigation or something like that, or just a part of wireframing. In this episode, we're going to push back on that. We're going to look at IAA's role in enterprise solutions, in complexity, answering user questions, content design, establishing your business metrics. And Dan and I look at what IAA really is today, and what it could be if we stopped treating it like a checkbox and started seeing it as strategic infrastructure. We will try to get practical. We use some examples. We talk about some taco trucks. We talk about recipe structuring and things like that, and really try to make this an accessible session for anyone who's in digital and wants to know what information architecture can do for an omnichannel experience to help users find what they need and have better experiences. All right. Without any further ado, I bring you Dan Brown of Curious Squid, information architect and a specialist in information spaces. Hello, everybody. Welcome to this episode of the Omnichannel X podcast. I'm very happy to have Dan Brown with me today. Dan, do you want to say hi to the audience?
Hello, Naz. Hello, listeners. It's great to be here.
And it's great to have you. So, Dan, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and Curious Squid? Like, how did you? What is the road that took you to this podcast episode today?
What a great way of asking that question. I got started in website design in mid '90s, pretty soon after I graduated from college. And back then, we were all sort of jacks of all trade. And I dabbled in design. I dabbled in development and programming and things like that. And then when I moved to the Washington D.C. area and I got a job at a consulting company, I really wanted to focus my career. And I ended up discovering and realizing that my focus was information architecture. And I was at various kind of government contractors and consulting firms for about 10 years. And then in 2006, I started a firm called 8Shapes with my business partner, Nathan Curtis. And we ran 8Shapes for 18 years. And just last year, we sunsetted 8Shapes, and I wanted to keep doing what we were doing. So I created a new entity called Curious Squid to kind of keep providing the kind of consulting that I was doing. 8Shapes was founded to be sort of, we had framed it in our minds as the adaptive path of the East Coast or of the Washington, D.C. area. Adaptive Path was a well-known user experience consulting firm in San Francisco, and we felt there was an opportunity in the D.C. area to have something similar. We did, end-to-end user experience design, user experience consulting. Through about 2015, we were bringing kind of large design teams to projects and kind of doing full-scale design work. The market really changed in 2015. We got smaller. We became more focused on consulting. Nathan went off and really focused on design system consulting, and I continued to do the more general UX stuff. When it came time to close, I really saw this as, well, first I was terrified of leaving 8Shapes behind because I'd been doing it for so long. Nathan and I had really gotten to a good place. We left on amicable terms. We're still friends. But it was time to say goodbye to 8Shapes. And then the second thing that after my fear was making a decision to try and focus more exclusively on information architecture. my strength, but also the thing that I really, really love doing. And I've been very fortunate over the last year and a half since starting Curious Squid to really be able to just do IA related projects. IA tends to be sort of pigeonholed as a content related field, but really IA can be seen in a more strategic, more systems thinking kind of way and really applies to lots of the different ways people interact with information. And so my practice now really all has IA kind of flowing through it, but I've engaged with clients in lots of different ways. So,
Okay.
and I posted something on LinkedIn and someone said, "Hey, you should talk to Nas." And then you and I talked, and that's the road that led me to this podcast right now. That's
Excellent.
here we are. That's how we got here.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, I can see from your description why someone would point you in my direction. I think we have a lot of commonalities in our background. I'm very interested when you say that IA is pigeonholed to something content related, but is bigger. This is the
Mm,
omni-channel podcast, and so we're very much looking at experiences, content design, governance systems in that holistic lens. So, what do you
right.
think that IA is beyond content? Because a lot of people will either not know what it means or think it means building website navigation.
Right.
So,
Right.
what?
I mean, you said exactly what I was about to say, which is when I say information architecture, 99 out of 100 people say you mean website navigation. And I do, but that's a part of it, right? There's a lot more to it. Even within a content ecosystem, we need, and by ecosystem, I mean sort of any space in which people engage with information, right? In some way. We need ways of connecting that information together to make it easier for people to jump from piece of information to piece of information, from content to content. However, that is, a way of organizing a library or, a way of organizing a record store, right? And that's just like we have known content and we want to create mechanisms to allow people to engage with the information in a way that's meaningful and relevant to their work. But at the end of the day, we're designing a system about that content. In some products, in some spaces, we have, let's call it a higher level of abstraction, but it is still a system that needs designing, a set of categories of the way things, information objects interact with each other, the way people want to access the information in that object, the way people want to manipulate that information. All of those are what, in my mind, structural concerns. So when people ask me for a definition of information architecture, I describe it as the practice of designing structures, right? So creating these frameworks that enable people to interact with information regardless of where or how that information exists.
So and if you want to give a different example, please do. But I'm going to use my new favorite
Yeah.
example. So I've got a taco truck business. I got my fleet of taco trucks.
Do you really?
No, but I would think it would be
Oh,
so cool if I did. But I think it's a nice example. You know how uh,
it's a great example.
there's an industry kind of cliche, which is teaching people how to structure content using recipes as an example.
Oh, yeah.
And I love that one because
Classic.
everybody eats, and
Yes.
I think that everybody when you're teaching something that's esoteric and foreign, borderline bizarre to people who need to understand it, but just don't have a mental model to put their hands on. Meeting them halfway with something they do know, I think, is useful. And I think that's why recipes is such a classic because it's something that is structured and but it's still a domain we all know. So I can't, if I'm going to try to teach you the domain of information architecture, I can't teach you the domain of information architecture using the example of, for example, particle physics, which is why I hate the terms like
Right.
atomic design. Um, I got to use
Right.
an.
It should be appetizer design. It should be other, food related things. We should do that. We should come up with food related metaphors. Can I build on your example of recipes before we get to the taco truck?
Go nuts.
Because
Yeah.
I love this example. I'm an avid cook. I cook every meal that my family eats. And So I have spent a lot of time looking at recipes, engaging with recipes, thinking about recipes, and ignoring recipes. And one of the things I like about this example and that we don't talk about enough is the fact that the content of a recipe, we think of recipes as kind of very structured, but also very samey, right, from one to the next. You get a list of ingredients, you get a little paragraph that sort of describes what to expect, and you get a series of steps. But the nature of those recipes can really vary a lot. If you told me you were an experienced cook, I would frame a recipe that I was giving you very differently than if you were an inexperienced cook. And in fact, I've got some cookbooks that are very much geared towards I don't know how to do anything in the kitchen, like just give it to me step by step, versus uh, like I've got a Jamie Oliver cookbook that is fantastic. And what's cool about this one is that it sort of tells you how to prepare several different dishes as part of an entire meal, but it assumes a level of expertise or like confidence in the kitchen. And
Prerequisite
so
knowledge,
it doesn't
familiarity.
yeah, it doesn't give you like times. It doesn't like there's there if you were a beginning cook, this would be very scary for you to do this. But to come in here as an experienced cook, and there may be sort of other dimensions where we can imagine our readers, right? But experience level for cookbooks, that seems to be the best. Maybe we can talk about sort of vegetarian versus not, or experienced or adventurous eaters versus not. But I really think what I like about recipes is we can just sort of talk about it at its surface level. But we can also dig below the surface. And it's below that surface where information architecture really shines. Because now I can start thinking about when I'm giving for the same recipe, for the same dish, let's say, do I have two different sets of content, right, depending on the experience level of the cook? Do I kind of categorize and tag content differently so that I can alter the nature of the recipe? Maybe we wouldn't do that in practice, but to extend the metaphor, I think it's great. I think the challenge with using recipes is the kind of IA that I like to think about now is at a higher level of abstraction. And I'm totally with you that using these very concrete ways of explaining these complicated ideas to people is a great way to, everyone has engaged with recipes in some ways. But how do I explain that higher level of abstraction that I'm that I think is a question I'll be asking for the rest of my career. I am sort of in constant search of saying, okay, we can talk about it at a content level because there's something accessible at that content level and there are meaningful examples that we can draw from, like recipes. But when I'm talking about designing a system that relies on a set of abstract concepts where I don't have a lot of concrete examples, that I feels like I often run up against a wall.
Okay.
I think I went that in a completely different direction than you were intending for that question, but
No, 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 no. It's fine. I wanna, I wanna. Before we go any further with the metaphor, I want to make sure that people are also plugged into why this is such a great metaphor. Because the reason I like recipes is because it
mm,
food has all of the things that other
mm,
systems have. So if it's enterprise software, for example, you're gonna have you're gonna have recipes. You're gonna have, for example, common ways that people solve business problems with different ingredients. And some of the ingredients will be interchangeable in the sense that we can go salt is salt is salt, and some of the ingredients will be quite unique. And then everything you just said, who is trying to build this solution or trying to understand the solution or evaluate the solution, buy the solution, implement the solution? That you will get different levels of expertise, different levels of understanding.
yep,
There are different domains, like there are different like cuisines, like have software for accounting, software for experience design, software for music generation. So you have different genres and styles within that. You have knowledge associated. You have certain reference facts. You have also all the things that we have in recipes are transmutable to other areas. It could be home furnishings. It could be software. It could be complex devices like I'm an airplane or a brain scanner. You have this
right,
idea of ingredients that make up a solution, and you have people trying to evaluate, buy, implement, consume that solution, and you have to
Oh,
wrap it all up, interconnect it, and so I think it's I like it as an example, but I want people to remember that it's mappable. I don't know what your domain is, but it's probably mappable to that domain.
we can we can find some equivalent to a recipe
Yeah,
there.
exactly.
It's as I've been writing more. I mean, I've been writing about IA my whole career, but I'm in this sort of phase where I'm really actually trying to avoid metaphors, and I think this comes from information architecture long being compared to a physical space, right? The abstract or the the digital virtual space that we
Hmm.
have can be comparable to a physical space, and people have used this metaphor for decades, and it bothers me to some extent because the virtual spaces that we design have so many more capabilities than we do in physical space. For example, I can put a book down. If I put a book down in my office, I don't have access to that book from my bedroom, right? But there are ways to access the same piece of information from different places within a virtual space. And so that, I mean, and we can keep going on that, right, for an hour, but that is just one example of the ways in which metaphors fail us. And so I'm sort of going through like an extended thought experiment
Hmm.
of like, can I use the plainest language possible that doesn't rely on metaphor to allow me to talk about information architecture? Because I feel an obligation, for better or for worse, to make sure the latest generation of designers feels like they can engage with IA, which some people would say is sort of a lost art, has been long ignored, is like all these things that, for one reason or another, it's not as prominent as I think it should be. And I want to create materials that allow people to engage with information architecture. So, yes, I love the metaphor of a recipe. I'm always up for a food related metaphor. And at the same time, I'm sort of curious as to whether there's an opportunity for us to tone down the metaphors to avoid the confusion that we have long sort of dealt with. Does that make sense?
Yes, but you provided me with a paths that diverge in the wood. One is to go back to my taco truck.
No, let's do it.
Okay, let's do the, okay.
Is there
There's a way to do both. Okay, so please use your non-metaphor ways of explaining to tell me about IA, but I am the taco truck proprietor. So I have my fleet of taco trucks, and you know, why is IA going to help me today with as few metaphors as you can?
before I do that? Is there a robust food truck culture where you are?
No.
Oh, that's sad.
Yeah, it is. It is. I'm hoping it will eventually arrive, but it's not a thing.
Next
Europe doesn't have
time,
wide streets, and that's one of the
oh, that's
prerequisites.
fair.
That's one of the prerequisites for food trucks is that you have these big wide streets.
I know you. I know you come to the DC area on occasion. We have a very robust food truck culture
I'm down
here. So next time you're in town, we'll go meet up at a food truck.
and try to sell them
I
on
think
AI solutions.
it's information architecture.
Yeah,
That would be insane.
yeah.
That would be fascinating. Okay, I think if I were to talk to, I don't know anything about the food truck business, but what's fascinating is one of my clients is in fleet management at the moment. So I am thinking very deeply about, let's say you were, if I may break the rule a little bit, and let's say you were the person who leases trucks to aspiring kind of food truck people, right? So you
Hmm.
do have a relatively large fleet. I would say
But
that
it's a franchise
the
model.
purpose, it's a franchise
Yeah, so
model, right?
somebody's got to
The
want to
purpose,
get my one of my trucks
right,
and
right.
lease it.
I think the purpose, what the role information architecture plays in a business like that is to understand how all of the data that exists about your fleet of trucks and your customers who are leasing those trucks, how all of that data can be pushed up and presented to you, the manager of this fleet or the owner of this franchise or whatever it is, in a way that is most meaningful for you. So when we think about, IA as content, in this case, the content is sort of the data elements. Now, I think there's a really important distinction to make here because we can think about the structure of data as the database, but the database, the structure of the database, the tables and the columns and all of that stuff in which it's put together is the domain of a database architect, right? Then they think about the most efficient way of storing and retrieving that data. We as information architects are kind of the other side of that coin of like, we have a bunch of data. What's the best way to kind of weave it together to tell a meaningful story to the people who need to consume it? Let's say you are especially interested in making the maintenance of these trucks as efficient as possible. That's one kind of data that you need. Do you need it all the time? Not necessarily. So, how do we present that data in a meaningful flow so that you can identify what are the trucks that need maintenance right now? What are the trucks that might need maintenance in the future? How do I plan for the ongoing maintenance of my fleet, right? All of these things are data that are creating a narrative.
Hmm.
And that narrative, I believe, is the domain of information architecture to help to kind of guide the flow of that experience. How did I do?
I think it was a if we use a term, it's a good gateway. So painted,
Good gateway.
yeah, you painted me a door, and so you have intrigued me to walk through it. So,
All right, let's do it.
all right, so there's the flow and the narrative.
Hmm.
I, I I would say there's multiple potential narratives through any set of information. So if I
Totally.
yeah, so if we come back to I'm trying to avoid the narrative, the metaphor also.
No, you should do it.
All right.
Go for it.
Yeah, so we have this information space. Like there are many different hallways to walk through, and depending on where I want to
Yes.
get in the information space or what my objective is, I may take
Yes.
different paths. And it's
Yes.
your job as the architect to set those paths up for me so that
Yes.
they are intuitive and efficient. I
Yes.
wanted to get back to the taco part of my trucks, which is I'm thinking
Yes.
about I as a proprietor of my franchise have my precious recipes for my many taco related dishes. Um,
Right.
the franchisees need to execute those recipes, and they need to buy stock, and they
Right.
need to understand what both proper preparation, presentation, and then the logistics around how how to know how much of X ingredients to order to be able to deliver recipes. And then there's the actual consumers, like my clients who want to know about these recipes. Are they healthy? What allergens do they have? And are they ethically sourced? So these are all different kind of angles with which I can approach the same information set. So I wanted to give you that as a diving board to continue.
Yes. I mean, I have nothing to add other than yes, there is so much. This is the thing. This is the thing. And this is why I like that you're doing kind of, you take this omnichannel lens because the world is made of data for better or for worse now. And there is going to be an increasing demand from everyday consumers all the way up to whatever, like just everybody wants access to that data. And we want to do it in a way that is meaningful to us as, people who make use of that data. It's not too intrusive, right? It is respectful. It is inclusive. It is all of these things that give us more information because we are, monkeys who just crave more and more information, who have this sort of driven curiosity to just understand our world and ourselves in it. All of that is data that needs to be packaged up in, I think, a humane way. We're all, as in this business, still dealing with products that are just data tables that we throw up in front of users. And you and I, as experienced
Give
designers,
me
know
give me
that
an example of what you mean by that.
by a data table, I
Yeah.
mean,
No, I know what a data table is, but
let's but like, so let's say I go, I'm someone who's buying a taco and I just need to know what the allergens
mhm.
are, right? And you've seen these things, I've seen these things, as someone with particular eating preferences, let's say, I'll go and I'll look and it's just sort of this long list of like, here's everything in on our menu, here are all the
Right.
allergens,
It's
those that are
literally
in
a
them.
table with X's on it. Yeah.
Right.
Hmm.
And we might do some testing and realize that's the best way of presenting that information, or maybe there are other ways of presenting it that's more humane, that's more respectful, right? But everything is a data table. Everything is stored as a data table. We don't need to present the data
Hmm.
in that format, right?
Hmm.
So I think I think there's, as you say, there's information and data kind of all the way down, right? There's just stacks and stacks of it, even for something as seemingly straightforward as a taco truck. How and the range of people that need to engage with that service are engaging with the information that service provides in addition to the tacos themselves.
Totally.
And so information architecture plays a role in every part of that journey.
So if I'm the proprietor, I'm working on this company who has my fleet of taco trucks, where do I begin to, in this day and age, articulate the use cases? Like how do I justify the where and how that effort is required? I think that's the main thing.
Yeah.
When we come back to what's happening with
I,
information architecture, it's the misunderstood, nobody cares, lost art. Like,
right.
so, I don't need to be sold, but sell me
Yeah.
on yeah.
So here's my pitch. And actually, I would really like some feedback on this pitch. So, what I do in my process, for better for worse, is mm, like we have terms like use cases, right? That we'll use, and a lot of people in software are familiar with and are comfortable with this notion of a use case. But when I talk about a use case, I almost can't help myself. I frame every use case as a question that a user has. That's the whole use case. The whole use case is, I mean, there's really just a small handful that end up sort of ballooning out or sort of reproducing or yeah, sort of in a fractal way, kind of like. But
Cascading.
one of the most simple ones is like, what do I need to pay attention to right now? Like I log into my bank. What do I need to pay attention to right now? Or log into my health portal. What do I need to pay attention to right now? Like, what's the thing that I should really focus on? And some services do this well enough and some don't. Another typical use
I just want to
case
point out there
is
that the question doesn't have to be consciously articulated. There
right,
are questions like I literally
correct.
go on and go, how much should I spend on my phone bill last night? That's a conscious
Right.
articulated question. What should I pay attention to
Yes.
right now is not. So
Right.
both are
Yes.
completely valid.
Right. Like you and I run, consult small consulting businesses. We're kind of watching budgets, right? And I'll peek into, my time tracking application and I'll just kind of every week just get a sense of like, where am I with things? Which of these projects do I need to pay attention to, right? I think another sort of typical question that people that let's call it the taco truck people have are how can I be doing better? Right? Okay, I'm spending, my expenses for these ingredients are X. How can I make it, 0.9X, right?
Mm.
How can I save some money on tacos or lettuce or whatever it is these days, right? So there are those kinds of questions and I always come back to them and I don't know how well they resonate with clients. They go with it. They follow the thought process. But to me, that sort of the intensely curious monkeys, like we always have these kinds of questions, and as you say, sometimes they're unconscious. Sometimes we, as people who are designing information products, need to kind of compel the questions to some extent, but
Telling a question.
like like getting a reminder that, hey, you should pay attention to this because you have an appointment,
Oh, right. Okay.
with your doctor
Yeah.
coming up, or you should pay attention to this because you're running out of lettuce,
Right.
right,
Providing
in your
triggers.
taco truck, right. But at the end of the day, and so that's where I think this question framing kind of falls flat, is we have needs that we don't always articulate or know that we have, but our products, if they're humane, can do it in a way, can remind us that we have these needs, can meet the needs that we aren't necessarily immediately aware of. But I'm sort of going off on a tangent. I think you asked me, how do we help people understand what role information architecture can play in their business? I like thinking about it in terms of use cases, and I articulate those use cases in terms of the range of questions that we expect people to have. If I have a list of questions, I can prioritize them. I can elaborate on them. I can sort of describe this as a whole category of similar types of questions, or I can cross reference those questions with different domains or areas of interest in the product. So, or related to the product. So that's generally kind of my starting point for
So
these things.
you asked for feedback. So on the questions thing, how do I put this? You're playing my favorite song. So on the questions thing, those who follow me closely will know that will already have been giggling because I have been teaching a user journey mapping methodology for years, and the way that I boil down all experience analysis is questions over time. So we start with a question. So the question you're referring to is what should I pay attention to? Maybe a question on a journey, but the reason that I'm in something is because I have some sort of goal, and that will have a question. It's like, how do I how would I run a successful taco business, or where can I get a cheap, nutritious, fast lunch on my pathetically short lunch break? So
Right.
I will have some sort of question which also defines my objective. I'm trying to
Yep.
satisfy that need, and then that will break down. So if I'm Googling and then I find the taco truck website and then I click the taco truck website, that at that point I might trigger okay, so what should I pay attention to on this whole landing page question? And then each answer leads to follow-up questions, and depending on who it is, they will take certain paths through those. So that part I love. The thing that I would add, for years I've been talking about the sort of three big metrics that I find that clients care about. And so for anybody listening, whomever you are, you're probably at some point asking somebody else for money and or support and buy-in. And what I found that the leadership people or higher up people will divide their big three questions. Everything will always ladder up to one list of big three questions. So I think executives have three main questions that they care about, which is, are we growing? Is this going to bump the top line up? Are we increasing revenues? Are we increasing, if revenues are not our concern, are we increasing a user count or whatever? Whatever our main big growth metric is, are we growing it with this thing that you're talking about? Then there is, are our customers happy? So, you can be growing but pissing people off, and that's going to be very short lived. So you have to have, it's like the triangle. So I need to have growth. I need to have customer satisfaction. And then I also need to have efficiency, because you can be growing, you can be making people happy, but you can go out of business because you're broke. So just about every kind of business metric, I think, will lead up to those three. So it's a nice, tight, short list, which I think is really useful. So that whenever you're pitching anything, you can go, am I talking to these? Am I ticking the three boxes? Because they are, anybody who's trying to make a business decision at the end of the day, I think is going to be interested in those. And then recently, in a project, we were doing stakeholder mapping, and we came up with another list of three, which is kind of like types of audience. So if you're talking about information architecture, the stakeholders within an organization. So I've got my taco truck, and I'm going to have different people within that organization. I'm going to have people who are interested in money. So they might just be interested in the growth and the efficiency questions of the other three. So I'm just a money person. Everything you're talking about, customer experience and customer satisfaction, I really don't care as long as the money's coming in and we're not wasting money. I could be an experience person. Like money's not really my concern. I just want to make people happy. I want to make the best product we can or service we can, and I want to, stand out. I want to be awarded for our wonderful experiences. And then you have tech people who don't really care about money and they don't even care about customers happy, but they love technology. So they want to understand, like, is this cutting edge? Is it scalable? Is it, integration ready? Is it, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So I found those two lists of three really help me structure communicating about this stuff. So it's not a concrete, like, fix this in your pitch, but it's sort of a framework to say, if you touch on those, then I think that it resonates more.
Fascinating. So, what's interesting to me about those is that I think of those as very zoomed out questions. Like I'm looking kind of if I have those questions, then my scope is the whole thing. And when we are building enterprise products, we are often building products for people whose scope is much narrower, right? So at the end of the day, I need to help them answer those questions, but I just might be in charge of the, maintenance of the trucks that are deployed to the Northeast, right? And so I have questions about those, and those questions may be more practical, like what do I need to pay attention to, or like what are the trucks that need maintenance, right?
Oh,
Those kinds of
wait.
very specific questions.
I'm with you.
Go ahead.
But this was very meta. So that was
Yes,
feedback on your presentation to, let's say, the organizational stakeholder community on why
I
IA is
gotcha. Yeah,
interesting.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yes,
Once you've got their buy-in with your pitch, then you actually get to the work of
yes,
IA, which then comes back to
yes.
what are our users' questions? And
I understand.
yeah, so
I gotcha.
yeah.
Yes. So by sort of saying, hey, you have these questions, and our aim is to design a product or a service or a information structure that can help you answer you executives those big questions
Mhm.
because those are the things you care about. And to help you answer those questions, let's dig into your business to understand what are the questions all the way
Down.
down.
Exactly. What are your users
Yeah, I like
asking?
it.
And then say,
Yeah.
okay, when a user has this question today, are we efficient in answering it? Are we using the right
Oh yeah,
technology?
that's
Are we
yeah, I like
delivering
that.
a good experience? And for me, that's so you map your example use case and you say, let's look at the life of Terry taco truck owner, and
Right.
they have this question. I find that kind of narrative storytelling super useful, and it takes it out of the abstract. So for, like, again, for whomever is listening, whatever your part of the business is, you're trying to get other people to relate to this. Maybe it's IA, maybe it's whatever you want to emphasize. When you bring it back to narratives, here's a human being, and they are trying to interact with our brand. Um, that's why I like the questions thing. So I agree with you totally on that. And then mapping that illustration of how are we doing it with that question today, and then spiking out to those other, like the three personality types and the three types of questions.
Yeah,
That's how.
that's cool.
Yeah, awesome,
I like it.
wicked. Okay, so we're exactly on time, and I'm on a very
Huh.
very nice. I know that 40 minutes went by.
That almost never happens to me. Yeah, that's great.
Yeah, yeah. So I think that's an awesome place to start. I hope that, and I imagine people have some useful takeaways. What I like about that is we've talked about the role of information architecture, but I think that no matter what you're doing, there's probably some good takeaways in that discussion for that. Okay, thank you so much, Dan. We're going to jump over to the Truth Collapse podcast because Dan is also a podcaster in his own right and does the Unchecked podcast, which looks at misinformation and the use of the skills and the assets that we've been talking about for how we can combat misinformation today. And so that, of course, is a great passion of mine. So you can join us over there on truthcollapse.com/podcast. For this episode, please do share with your friends. We are not aggressive marketers, so we do rely a lot on word of mouth. So reshares and likes and comments and all those good things are highly appreciated. Thank you, Dan, so much. Any last words for the audience?
Great time. Thanks, Naz.
Awesome. All right, we'll see you next time. And if you're going to join us over on Truth Collapse, see you in a little bit.